My name is David Ulbrich, and I'm going to interview Mr. William Smith. Today is September 4th, 2010. We are at the 376 Bomb Group reunion. Mr. Smith, tell me when and where you were born.
I was born in Colorado Springs, Colorado in 1920.
And what was life like growing up in Colorado Springs in the 1920s and 30s?
Well, I moved out of Colorado Springs before I was 6 months old. Went home to New Mexico. My folks lived in New Mexico. And the reason I was born in Colorado was because the fraternity ward in Santa Fe had caught fire and burned down, so they put my mother on the train to send her to Colorado Springs, and that's where I was born. And then right after that, she brought me right back to New Mexico. And New Mexico was to Santa Fe, New Mexico. It was a beautiful, quiet old town, and about half Spanish and half Anglo. And the town was really old town and a very wonderful place to grow up on. As a matter of fact, when I was between 2 and 3 years old, we lived about 2 blocks from a place called Burro Alley, and that's where the wagon trains came into. And believe it or not, there were still a few wagons coming into that location in Burro Alley.
What were your high school years like during the Great Depression? Did the Great Depression affect your community and your family?
Amazingly enough, Santa Fe was not bothered with the Depression hardly at all, because it was the capital of the state of New Mexico, and gambling was wide open, and people from Texas and Oklahoma, Colorado, and Arizona used to come there to gamble. And my brother and I used to go out to the Diablo Canyon and catch snakes and bring them home and skin them, roll the skins back off of them. Then we'd make belts out of them and purses and wallets, and sell them to the tourists, gamblers that came in to gamble and bring their families with them. And that was where we got our spending money, earned it that way.
Let's go up to the late 1930s, 1940, 1941. When and how did you join the U.S. military?
January the 2nd, 1941, I joined the Army Air Corps. I had learned how to fly before I got in the service. So they sent me to San Antonio, Texas, to Kelly Field, so I could take flying lessons there. Then they found out that my right eye only had 20/30. And also they found out that I hadn't been to college. I graduated from high school in Santa Fe in 1939, but I hadn't gone to college.
So at that point, that was enough to kind of disqualify you from being a pilot, even though you did know how to fly.
Yeah. So they sent me after we went through basic training. They sent me to Chanute Field, Illinois, for like AM training, aircraft mechanic training, and I had about 5.5 months of that. Then they sent me to Winterloch's Windsor, Connecticut, where I joined the 57th Fighter Group. And that's where I really enjoyed that 57th Fighter Group. And when December the 7th happened, the bombing of Hawaii, we moved. They put us back to train into the base there, and loaded all 300 of us on that train, and had the curtains all shut and said, "Do not open the curtains and look out." We went on that train for 3 days and 4 nights. And about 4 o'clock in the morning of the 4th night, the train pulled up, and they said, "Okay, everybody out." Everybody fell out in columns of 4, and the only thing we could see was a big door with one light bulb over the top of it. And when they opened the door, they said, "Everybody fall in there and find a place to sleep." So we fell in. It was already full. It was full of black troops in there. So they had all the bunks and everything, so we just slept on the floor. The next day they left. And that was at Groton, Connecticut, only 50 miles away from where we started. We never did know where we went, but we went on that train for a long trip. And that's where we were there to supposedly guard the boats where they built submarines in New London, Connecticut. And we were there until around March
1942, correct?
1942.
Yes, sir.
They shipped us down to Fort Dix. And we were there for 2 to 3 weeks and taking all kinds of shots and getting all set ready to go ship overseas. Then they loaded us on a huge ship that at one time had been a cruise ship for passengers going.
So a luxury liner like the Queen Elizabeth or something like that?
It was called the HMS Louis Pasteur, a British ship. And we pulled out of New York Harbor, and they said, "Where's the escort?" "Oh, you won't be able to see them, but they're there." Well, we went zigzagging across the ocean and changed course. Every 10 or 15 minutes, they changed course. And we were on that boat for a solid month before we went around the Cape of Good Hope, Good Horn, around South Africa. We stopped at Durban, South Africa, and we were there for 5 days. And then from there, we went up through between Madagascar and Africa, and came out on the Red Sea and came up the Red Sea and docked at Port Tufik, Egypt.
So were you still attached to the fighter squadron
The
then?
whole outfit went.
Right.
Our whole 57th went. And our planes were shipped over on the Ranger, aircraft carrier Ranger. And because it was too far to fly those planes from the United States over, so they sent them over. So then they sent us up to right at the desert, out the other side of Alexandria. And then the next thing we know, that Rommel's troops were hidden right in toward Alexandria, so they shipped us out of there on a train, a whole bunch of us, all the way up to Haifa, Palestine. So we were up there and been about 2 weeks. When I had made buck sergeant by that time, so I my job was to march and make them drill to keep them from getting stale. And then there was a couple of officers from Halpro came over there and asked for volunteers. Said, we've got 24 B-24s over in Little Palestine, and they want somebody to change all those engines because they didn't have any mechanics with them. So there were 17 of us that volunteered, and I was one of them. So we went over and Little Palestine, started changing 96 engines on 24 B-24s. And they liked the fact that we worked so good on those B-24s that they decided to keep us all. So I got transferred out of 57th into, at that time, Halpro. So we were in Halpro for, maybe a month or two or three. I don't remember how long. But then they decided to start a new bomb group over there. So they started 125th bomb group, first bomb group ever outside the United States.
Organized. Organized. Yes, sir.
So I was, like I say, I was a buck sergeant when I got into the outfit, and as soon as they formed this new bomb group, I made staff sergeant. One day I was staff sergeant, and about 2 or 3 days later I was a tech sergeant. Then about a month later I was a master sergeant. And I was master sergeant, the crew chief on aircraft number 39. It was titled the Ripper the Second.
Ripper the Second?
Yeah.
In terms of this time period, you volunteered for the Halpro group. That must have been right around May or June or so, 1942?
Yeah.
Roughly May or June?
Yeah, it was.
And then you switched out all the engines.
Yeah.
Were you attached to that group? Were you part of the Halpro group on the first Ploesti mission on June 12th, 1942? Were you with the group?
Yeah.
So what was? Can you take me back in time and tell me what your reaction was when you heard they were going Ploesti, or did you even know what Ploesti was, or what? Tell me what that day would have been like.
Well, I know it was a very important mission, and we had to really work hard to make sure the planes were in tip-top shape. And I had a very good crew, 6 men beside myself. I was the crew chief, and they took off. Captain Iverson was the pilot on my plane at that day.
Iverson, you said Captain Iverson?
Captain Iverson, yeah.
How did you interact with the flight crew members or with Captain Iverson? Obviously, they were being briefed while you're putting the finishing touches in the morning on the plane, making sure everything tests out. But how was the interaction between your grounds crew and the flight crew?
We were good friends. Good friends. It was very nice. The officers were very, very good to us, enlisted men. We were good to the officers. We enjoyed being together, and wished them all good luck. And they got to where they used to call me. They wanted to argue to get on Smitty's plane. They used to call me Smitty. And I said, Lucky Smitty's plane, because I knew how to fix the carburetors and everything else where they got very good hours on the aircraft. When my planes would come back from missions, my plane always had extra gasoline. Most of them had to fight to get in and land first, so before they ran out of gas. That old Lucky Smiths had, I just learned how to work those carburetors over and make them work, get good gas air mileage.
Yes, sir. Can you tell me what maybe a typical day would have looked like for the mission? Were you working all night the night before, and then when the bomb crews take off, what did you and your maintenance crew, your grounds crew, do after they took off?
Go back to where we were camped, particularly when we were in Libya. We were right there at camped on the beach at Benghazi, Libya. We were right on the beach. So as soon as after the planes went off, we go back to the camp and go for breakfast, and then hit the sack to get some more rest, or either that or we'd go out in the ocean and go swimming. And then when we started having the dust storms, you couldn't see your hand in front of your face. The dust storms were so bad. And the planes used to get up and go before 8 o'clock in the morning on their missions. And after that, that's when the dust started rolling in. You could just see it rolling in. And so we'd head for the beach, and there was a little island about, you might see several hundred yards out on the ocean, Mediterranean Ocean. We'd swim out to that and spend the day out there while the sand was blowing around out there. And you could, because when we had to stay on shore, we'd walk around with a wet handkerchief on our face. The dust was so bad. And I often wondered what would ever happen to our lungs if we kept breathing that stuff. But evidently it didn't bother me because I still have real good lungs, and I don't have to be, you don't see me carrying an oxygen tank around. But,
so then the mission would have taken what, depending on where they were going, 8, 10, 12 hours, and then they would be coming back later in the afternoon or the evening?
Sometimes they were gone 16 hours because they carried extra gas tanks in one bomb group, bomb bay. They would hold 27,000 gallons of gas so that they could have the 16-hour trip. And I remember my plane lost an engine on one trip, and they landed in Tunisia. So they flew me and one of my best mechanics down to Tunisia to change engines on that airplane. And we changed the engine and had it all ready to go by 4 o'clock in the evening. It was all plane all gassed up and everything. We took off, and Captain Iverson was flying it. I can't remember his co-pilot's name, but nevertheless, we took off at 4 o'clock in the evening. We had, on the way back, on the way over, we flew over Palermo, and it was daylight. They didn't shoot at us then going over that way. I don't know why, but anyhow, on the way back, coming back over the same way, they started shooting at us, so we had to go higher up in altitude and turn to the right toward this desert. And by that time it turned dark, and they somehow or another they got mixed up, didn't know which the correct direction. They lost their direction at night, trying to follow the stars and so forth. There's no moonlight or anything. Well, they were flying around and around. We flew around for several hours. And finally we're starting getting low on fuel. So they shut off the outboard engines. We're just flying with two engines, the inboard engines. And the radio had gone out. So they couldn't talk to anybody. But the radio man was talking on with the that's
The Morse code. The
Morse,
Morse code.
yeah, the Morse code. Finally came in contact with a British base, and they asked them to turn on the lights. And as soon as they turned on the lights, we just went down and landed just as quick as we could. We run to the end of the runway and turned off on the taxi strip, and the engine just quit, ran out of gas. Well, that was close.
That was a close call. So then, towards the afternoon on a typical day with not that there is really a typical mission, but you would go back, would you go back to the runway area, back to the airfield to wait for the ships to return?
Yeah. One I had my own Jeep assigned to me, and I used to run out there, and my plane would follow me in on the taxi strips. So I'm sitting out there by the end of the taxi strip, and every time they had a good successful mission, they used to come in and buzz the field and take off. Well, this one particular day, they buzzed the field, and this front plane, instead of taking off this way, he moved over this way, and by that time, he pulled right in front of the plane right behind him, and he raised his wings up this way, but he hit the tail section on a plane that pulled in front of him, knocked it off. And that plane, the pilot reared those engines up as far as he could, but they just went up like this, and then come down like this, and then turned back over and plunked right down practically in front of me, and killed every man in the plane. And that was a terrible experience to see all your men get killed that way. It wasn't one of our planes. It was belonged to one of the other. I don't remember which one groups, but they lost a good crew. And then it started burning, and then bullets were flying every which direction. But everybody jumped on top and was pulling all the people out of the plane. And that was one of the sad deals that we had. Then another time, there was a P-38 that had been on a mission, protecting a mission, and he had lost an engine. So he came into land, and he missed the first time. He had to go around, and he came into land again, and I don't know what happened to him, but he cartwheeled, just cracked up. And then he landed up. And I went tearing over there in my Jeep. About the time I got there, the pilot had crawled across and was sitting on the wing, lighting a cigarette. He didn't get hurt. So I was talking to him, and he was very nice and no problem. The ambulance came roaring up there, and they took him out, put him in the ambulance to take him to the hospital, field hospital, to check out. And he died of shock on the way over to the hospital. That's another sad experience.
I had a question for you about the type of repairs you needed to make on the B-24s. Were the repairs, other than wear and tear, but the repairs you would have made, would they have been from damage from anti-aircraft from flak, or would they have been from damage from enemy fighter machine guns? What was what were some of the types of repairs you needed to do, and what were the hardest repairs? Can you speak a little bit to that, please?
Well, they used to had to change cylinders, one or two cylinders on each of one engine or so when it came back. But mostly there was very few repairs. Those Pratt and Whitney engines were the best engines for airplane. I'm sure was tickled to death they didn't have Wright engines like the B-17 had, because those darn things, well, they're flying along and all of a sudden they'd blow a cylinder and cause an airplane to crash.
Let me interrupt 1 second. Guys, I'm really sorry. He talks so low that we can hear you talking. So you want to stop a minute for wrapping it up in just a little bit. I think we've done good though. Okay.
All right, I had asked you about the repairs that you're making and the types of repairs. You said you switched out cylinders frequently.
Yeah.
What about battle damage? What was some of the more serious types of battle damage that the B-24s sustained?
Well, a lot of shell fragments had blasted holes in the wings and stuff. We had to patch those up pretty quick, but we had three members of my crew that was their job, to patch up all the holes and everything. But usually it wasn't too bad, and we had to really take good care of the landing gear and keep lubricated and everything. Fortunately, my plane never had any problem with the landing gear, but a lot of times, several times, planes would be coming in to land, and one of the landing gears just collapsed out from under them, and they just go sliding down the runway. So my planes never had any trouble that way. That's why they called me Lucky Smith. Because we had such good maintenance, me and my crew on my plane, that kept it going real good. So I was going to tell you about the time when we were moved from, before we got to Libya, we had one stopover, you might say, in Tobruk, where the Germans had really bombed that place. After we got there, landed there, they were still bombing us. We used to dig instead of digging a slit trench, we dig the whole tent out 4 or 5 feet deep and put the tent over it. We used those British tents, which were the best thing for the desert. But then pretty soon that stopped, and we moved on up to Libya.
What were the differences between Egypt and Palestine and Libya?
Well, Palestine, we didn't have any bombing or anything like that. But while we were there, every Saturday, we had a bus that took us all into Tel Aviv, Palestine. And it was all pitch black in those days, no lights at all. But you'd be amazed at how good you can see after you get so used to the dark. We used to walk down the boardwalk there in Tel Aviv, and there was always a guy, 2 or 3 guys selling hot ears of corn. And that was our favorite thing to do, and walking down the boardwalk there. And it was very nice. Tel Aviv was very nice. People were very nice to us over there.
Who were some of your other pilots that you worked with? You mentioned Iverson.
Iverson.
Were there other pilots that you can recall, or did you work with him for the full time?
He used to fight to fly my plane. So he actually flew my plane more than any of the others. Of course, once in a while they got up there. I think there was a Jorgensen Jorgensen's, Captain Jorgensen, that flew the plane once in a while. But otherwise, they used to fight to get on my plane.
Do you recall having interacted with Halverson himself? Because it was a fairly small unit when it started. Did you
Yeah.
ever meet or talk with Halverson at all?
Oh yeah, we were good friends. He was a very nice person.
Yeah, tell me about him. What was his temperament? What was his mood? Can you tell me a little bit about him? What was his leadership style?
Well, he was very, very friendly, very nice. Yeah. Always. I know one time I was in the plane with him, and we'd been on some sort of a mission. I don't remember what it was now, but there was only, didn't have the full crew on there. I think it was one of the trips we made to Egypt. Made a beer called, bring back some booze and beer and stuff like that from Egypt. Can't think of the name of the town.
In Egypt, so he was interested in the good morale of his
Oh,
men
yeah,
and
yeah.
taking care of his men, making sure they were
Yeah.
you were as happy as possibly could be.
I went around in our outfit that one time and gathered up money to take into Cairo, Egypt, and for $1,000, all we could buy was 5 quarts of I.W. Harper and 6 cases of beer for $1,000. And then when we got back, we had one heck of a big blowout when we got that back.
Moving ahead, how long did you serve as a crew chief with the what would eventually have been the 376th?
Well, the whole time, the President Roosevelt had donated 4 airplanes to the Yugoslavs from Yugoslavia, and after they took my airplane back to the United States for a bomb drive in the States, they assigned me to those 4 airplanes as a flight. I forget what my title was then, but anyhow, I was in charge of the maintenance on all 4 of those airplanes.
This was the Royal Yugoslav Air Force.
Yeah.
Was there a Captain Skacic?
Captain Radoslavich.
All right.
He was the head man, Radoslavich. And the last time I saw him was at the reunion that we had in 1981. Captain Radoslavich was there. He was sure glad to see me. I was glad to see him too.
And how long did you continue to work with the 376? Then did you get transferred back to the States at some point?
President Franklin Roosevelt, no, wasn't it? It was Truman by that time. At the end of September 44, September 44, he ordered 13 of us master sergeants that had been crew chiefs and everything back to the United States, and they were supposed to have flown us back, but they didn't. They put us on a ship, in a USA ship, Captain Briggs' ship. It took 10 days to get back. Well, by the time we got back, we landed in Newport News, Virginia. They gave us time to all shower and put on clean uniforms and everything. they put us on a special train that had a train just for baggage, and then for the 13 of us on a passenger car, and a kitchen car attached to that. And we made a trip across the United States. We left there at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and we pulled into just the other side of Denver, Fort Collins.
Fort Collins, yes.
And that's
Fort
where
Collins.
we deboarded the train. And then they found out that Truman couldn't wait for us, and he got 13 people he found there in the United States. We were supposed to go to Elko, Nevada to train on B-29s, the 3 B-29s that carried the A-bomb over Hiroshima. So we didn't make it. So here they were with 13 master sergeants. They didn't know what to do with us. So they sent us to Lincoln, Nebraska, and then sent us to Alliance, Nebraska, and made instructors out of us. And then they sent each one of us to separate bases. They sent me to Walker Base in Kansas, and I had to start my own school. They furnished the building and mock-ups and all that, and then I had to get 6 instructors, people that I could train as instructors. So we had a school there to train on B-29 maintenance. I was there for 1 year. And then I had 128 points, so they said, "You're get up for discharge." So I said, "Good." He shipped me. I went to El Paso and got my discharge.
All right. Well, we're about finished, sir, but I wanted to see if there was any other memories you had that you wanted to share. Anything that had, jogged your memory that you might want to share in these closing minutes?
Well, I had there in Italy, I had an attack, appendicitis attack, and it was so bad they put me on an ambulance and carried me 60 miles to the nearest field hospital. Like Nash unit, only it was a field called 4th Field Hospital at that time. I got there about 6 o'clock in the morning, and Dr. Flood had just come in from the Anzio beachhead, and he operated on me. And peritonitis had set in, so they had me in an intensive care tent, and I was there for 23 days before I finally came out of there. When I went in there, I weighed almost 200 pounds and solid muscle in those days. And when I came back out, I was only 119 pounds when I came back to the outfit. So I was building myself back up again. So things was going okay. Then they shipped me back to the United States.